Welcome to The Total Woman. We're going to be talking about elder law tonight, something I've wanted to do a program on for a long time, and I'm glad I waited because I have an opportunity to now have Lucy Budman with us. And I know that she's going to a lot of things that we may want to know or may not want to know. I'm not sure what.
I think it's good to know. It's always better to plan ahead.
It's absolutely always better. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. I was so delighted to find you. That worked out so well.
Thank you.
I'd like you to start out with a little bit of your background, just so people know where you came from and how you got interested in the law, perhaps?
Sure. Well, my family's always been involved in helping professions. A lot of the people back to my grandmother. And I knew that was something I wanted to do. But medicine ended up not being for me. My little sister's a doctor.
So it was for somebody.
It was for help people. And I ended up, going to law school at BU, and I did legal aid for a couple of years out of school. And it's a great thing to be able to do. And yet at the end of the day, when you're doing that type of work, you realize that you're just up against so much, just in terms of resources, in terms of, if you're doing a landlord-tenant situation and someone can't afford to pay the rent, eventually they're going to get evicted.
Yes.
And it just wears down on you.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. So one thing that, it transitioned over time into doing more and more elder law issues where you can really help somebody in their family. And at the end of the day, you might not be able to save everything, but you can help somebody just make sure that they get old comfortably at home.
Yes.
And they have the resources that they need for themselves and for their family.
Well, that's a very big job to do, and an important one, because I think Americans in general are really worried about that.
Yeah.
They keep hearing about Social Security disappearing, and quite honestly, Social Security won't do the job for you anyway.
It's true.
It's very nice and very helpful, but
it's true.
It's not
if you try living on Social Security, that's not going to get you very far, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so this is something that you found your way to from doing other things, and it resonated with you.
That it just made me really comfortable that this is something that I can do. This is my niche. And just the people that you help make it really worthwhile. Just because when you have someone who comes in and they're just not sure what to do, either it's someone's child who's in there for their parent or for their grandparent, and they just need direction in terms of what happens now. And sometimes, a lot of the time, we have someone who's wondering, well, what's going to happen to me?
Sure.
You just retire. You're 65. You're pretty young, but you start to think, well, what happens next? What happens in 10 years? What happens in 20 or 30?
Yes.
People are living a long time.
Yes, they are. It's very true. So let's pretend that someone is coming to you with a concern, a financial concern, or a medical concern. Where do you begin with someone?
Well, we start off by getting a sense of what their situation is, because the situation of somebody who's 65 and newly retired might be very, very different from someone who's just thinking about planning when they're 85 and have had a diagnosis of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Depending on where you are, we start out with the foundational issues. Right now, most people, when they come to me, they're still able to make medical decisions and financial decisions for themselves. But over time, you might not be able to do it anymore. And one of the most common misconceptions is, well, I'm married or I have children, and these people are going to be able to automatically step in for me if I get sick. And people believe, and probably with good reason, that my husband or my daughter is going to be able to step in for me and make those kinds of decisions. And that's just not true. If you haven't done any planning, then there's nobody who's authorized to make legal decisions, financial decisions, or medical decisions. Family, what they can do is they can go to the probate court and talk to a probate court judge and get authority to do that. But that's really expensive. It takes a long time. You know, our courts are great, but they're really overburdened.
Sure.
And just like a lot of areas in society are right now. So what might be a relatively simple process ends up taking months or years.
And you need a
And
decision
you need
now.
a decision now. Yes, you know, if your grandmother's in a nursing home and you need to pay her bills, but you can't get access to the money because she's sick and she can't sign her checks anymore.
Yes.
You know, you need something to happen right now.
So what do you tell them?
Well, I tell them the best thing to do is plan in advance. You can have a durable power of attorney to make economic, financial, legal decisions for you. And you can name someone now while you're healthy who can do those things for you.
Yes.
And sometimes people say, well, you know, can I get one off the internet? I've seen them on there.
Yeah.
And that can be a real mistake. A lot of those powers of attorney online are intended for younger people who are worried about fraud, which unfortunately does happen.
Yes.
And they're worried about giving too much power to their agent.
Yes.
But if you don't give your agent enough power, if you know you're an older person, your spouse, you want to give them all the power.
Yes.
Because if they don't have the ability to do something, if say the power of attorney doesn't let them transfer your house, they can't take steps to protect it. They have to go back to court, back to the probate court judge and ask for permission, and they might not get it. The probate court judge has a lot of discretion, and some of them have different feelings about, you know, what protecting a house might mean.
Sure.
And how your money should be spent.
Interesting. In some states, because my mother in her elder years was in Arizona, which has paperwork like I couldn't even imagine anybody bothering to have this much paperwork. And I needed 4 power of attorneys, 4 different ones.
Wow.
And so let's not talk about Arizona since we're not there.
Yes.
In the state of Massachusetts, does a durable do everything, or do you need real estate and medical, and do you need special ones in addition?
Well, what a durable power of attorney, it basically does whatever the document says it does. We don't have a statutory power of attorney in the state that that has been created by the state government in terms of it can do this or it can do that. So it has the powers that are written right there in the document. If it doesn't say you can do something, people will have something separate is for healthcare. So they'll have one for finances and legal and one for medical decisions.
Okay.
And that'll be called a healthcare proxy.
Yes.
And so it's a little bit simpler than Arizona.
Yeah.
We don't have all 4. But it's important in the one that you have to make sure it gives you the power that you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to see somebody who specializes in this.
Yes.
Because elder law is confusing, and it's does family law, who does divorce, might know a little bit about, but it's not going to be their focus, and they haven't thought about what's going to happen if someone's in a nursing home, and how are we going to protect the house?
Yes. And I would guess that that's an area of the law that we'll see changes in as the boomers go through, and you start to have large numbers of people who are elderly and are dealing with this kind of issue. We can be pretty sure. Yes.
We already have.
Yes.
There was a massive change in how the law worked in 2006 that has made it a lot more difficult for somebody who's thinking about planning at the last minute. If you're coming in and you're thinking, well, what's going to happen 5 or 10 years down the road, you have a lot of options. If you're thinking, well, what's going to happen to me next month, you still have options, and that's something that's important to know. Even if you or your loved one is going into a nursing home tomorrow, you can do things to protect their house. You might be able to do things to create a fund to take care of them and to provide what Medicaid doesn't. Because Medicaid can be a great resource, but it might not cover dental care. It might not cover eye care, and it might not cover just the extras that make life in a nursing home less difficult.
Yes.
And there are ways to make sure that there's a fund, a sum of money that can pay for those extras. But you have to do the planning.
Now, is it more difficult for someone who is dependent on Medicaid rather than Medicare?
So that's a great question, because that's a huge distinction. And everybody, if you've worked a certain number of years, or your spouse has, and you're over 65, you get Medicare. And Medicare is a type of health insurance.
Yes.
Health insurance doesn't cover long-term care. There are no health insurance policies that'll cover nursing homes. They might have some where they cover it for a very limited period of time, a maximum of 100 days. Days.
Looks good on paper. Doesn't work that way. Yeah.
They have standards for, are you getting better? And if you're not getting better, if you're not in rehab, you're not improving in a nursing home, Medicare coverage can be a lot shorter. It can be 20 days. It could be 40.
Wow. Who makes that decision?
The nursing home has staff that make that decision. It's a tough call because if they leave you on too long, they can be accused of Medicare fraud, of billing Medicare more than they're supposed to, and they can lose their Medicare funding for all of their patients,
for everybody
in the entire nursing home, and they never want that to happen.
Of course not.
So a lot of them are going to be conservative, and I took my mom off of Medicare. I don't understand why. She's still getting rehab.
Yes.
And that can happen. So once Medicare runs out, the question is, well, now what?
Yeah, what takes over?
What takes over?
Is there something that takes over?
There are a couple of options. Some people who have thought about this well in advance have long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance, it has its upsides. It's a private fund. You've paid into it over the years, and it's going to pay out now to cover costs in assisted living, to cover costs at home, to cover costs in a nursing home.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't have it. It's expensive.
Yes.
Sometimes I heard a couple come to me saying they'd been quoted for a $300 a day policy. They were both in their 80s, good health, but in their 80s, $12,000 a year.
Yes.
So it just wasn't in their budget. If you are already ill, it's too late. You're not going to get a policy if you've already been diagnosed, or if you're relatively young, but you have a long-term illness like multiple sclerosis or something like that.
Sure.
You just won't get coverage. So it's a great resource for people who can get it, but it's expensive, and a lot of the times the policies are smaller than the costs.
Yes.
We have Bear Hill up in Stoneham, I think it is.
Yes.
Right now, one of the typical rates for a semi-private room, so this is a shared room, is $425 a day.
Yes.
Overwhelming.
Yes.
That's $13,000 a month. I think it's $160,000 a year. And most long-term care policies just aren't that big. And so you don't have a policy. Now what?
Yes.
Well, you can pay out of pocket. So you can pay the nursing home, $425 a day,
Yes.
$13,000 a month. And for a lot of people, that's going to decimate their life savings really, really fast.
In 6 months or a year for many people.
Yeah.
Yes.
The worst case scenario, I had someone just talking to me at lunch, and they found out what I do, and they said, "Oh yeah, that happened to my mom. We sold our thing down. We eventually, she spent all her money. She got Medicaid, and then she died a couple months later, and we had to take out a loan for her funeral."
Wow.
That never has to happen. You can do so much planning to keep yourself from being in that situation and to protect your family. So then there's Medicaid. And a lot of people, a surprising number of people are getting Medicaid just because nursing homes are so expensive.
Yes.
Medicaid covers people who are medically eligible, which means they need to be in a nursing home.
Yes.
Obviously, if you don't need to be there, you don't want to be, so that's not an issue for most people, and who are financially eligible. And that's where the planning comes in, because there are different techniques depending on your situation. For a married couple, there's a lot you can do to protect a spouse who's in a community. For a single person, there are things you can do to make sure that they have the resources for the extras that they need.
Yes.
And a lot of the times you can do a lot to keep the home and the family, which I think is so important to so many people. I have so many people who come in and say, I've got money and that's for my care, but there's no way, my children are going to be able to afford to live in my neighborhood, which I want them to be able to do. Or, I just want to be able to pass this on to them.
Yes.
And can that happen? And, if you do the planning, the answer is always yes. We can protect your home.
And how do you, I'm fascinated to know how you do that. How do you protect your home when you're making a plan for your children and yourself in a healthcare situation? What are some of the options to secure your house?
Well, they go from the easy to the complicated. With the easy options, they're actually not as good. Some people will say, hey, can I sell my home to my daughter for $1? And people will go, is that okay? There are so many downsides with doing that. The first is, when you sell a home to someone for $1, that's not a sale, that's a gift.
Yes.
You've given it away.
Yes.
When you give something away, there are tax consequences.
Yes, and there are gift taxes.
There are gift
Yes.
taxes, yep, that's a big one. Gift taxes don't affect so many people these days. At least until 2012, the end of 2012, we have a $5 million gift tax exemption. What that means is you can give away during your lifetime $5 million before you get taxed. You have to report if you give away more than $13,000. People always ask me about that too. Can I give away $10,000? Can I give away $13,000? The IRS lets you give away $10,000 or $13,000 without reporting it, without telling them that you've made those gifts.
Oh.
If you give away more, you have to tell them. So you file a special gift tax return. Doesn't mean you pay taxes.
You just have to be...
You have to let them know that you've done it.
Clear that you've done it.
That you've done it. And they'll add all that up, all the gifts you make during your lifetime. If it adds up to more than $5 million, you start to pay gift taxes. So
is that new?
It is.
I've never heard that before.
Not actually new, but it used to be $1 million. Now it's $5 million. It might go back down to $1 million, depending on what Congress does or doesn't do in the next couple years.
Well, that's a crapshoot.
That's a tough question. So that's beyond my expertise.
Okay.
But that's a tax gift. Then there's also what's called a Medicaid gift. If you go into a nursing home tomorrow, they look back 5 years to see if you've given something. You've given something, it could be to a charity, it could be to a family member, could be to a child or a grandchild to pay for school. You've given something away and you haven't received fair market value, you haven't gotten something back.
Yes.
Based on those gifts, they can disqualify you from getting benefits. And depending on the size of that gift, the longer disqualification period is.
Oh my gosh. So for being a good guy and giving things away, you actually get penalized.
If you're looking for benefits, if you're in a nursing home, you're sick and you can't afford those payments for a long period of time, which most people can't.
I'm sure.
It's a real trap. Most people don't know it. And they come in and they say, well, my daughter got divorced and I paid. Does that mean my husband can't get Medicaid now? And sometimes it means that for a period of time he can't. Wow. And it's a hard result.
Who keeps these books?
It's a hard result. When you go
That's pretty complex stuff.
When you apply for benefits, our paralegal, who's tremendous, she puts together applications that are, they look back 5 years. They look through 5 years worth of bank statements, investment returns, everything you own. They look through it. And a lot of the time, this is people's first experience with the system, with the welfare system, because that's what Medicaid is. And they have no idea, what it really takes. And unfortunately, when someone's in a nursing home, they're not there because they want to be or that they want to,
Sure,
take
it's
advantage.
A necessity.
It's a necessity. Yeah. They need the help. And there's a lot of talk sometimes in the news.
Yeah.
And so it's something that a lot of the times someone has a house and they might have a little bit of money and it's just not going to last them and they need the help. And if they've given things away, they might not get what they need or they may be disqualified for months. And then the question is, well, who's going to pay now?
Yes.
And then you better hope your family can pay.
Wow. Well, in that situation, Lucy, if you owned a home, but you'd given a pile of stuff away beforehand, would you be forced, or would that be one of your few options in attaining money, was to sell that house?
That's one thing that some people have done.
Yeah.
You can sell the house. People will ask me sometimes, hey, can I take a reverse mortgage? Remember, one thing you have to know.
Let's talk about reverse mortgages.
Those are tricky.
Yes,
those are
I've heard that.
Tricky. People will ask me, well, I want to be able to take a reverse mortgage so I could go to an assisted living if I need to. Not going to work.
No.
To get a reverse mortgage, you have to live in your house.
Okay.
If you don't occupy it, I think it's for a period of 12 months, if you don't occupy that house, then the mortgage comes due. So you have to pay up or sell the house and pay from the proceeds.
Okay.
If you pass away, the mortgage becomes due. So it's not, if you're not going to stay in that home, if your health situation is not going to let you stay there, it's not always a good option. It's not going to pay for an assisted living. In assisted living,
Yes.
you're not in your house.
Do people borrow against their houses in situations like that, or are banks not open to that kind of thing? It would be a little risky.
It would be.
Yeah.
You need an income, especially these days with what the loan situation is.
Yes.
And the standards are a lot tighter than they used to be. You need to have good credit, and you need to have income coming in. And if you're in an assisted living or you're in a nursing home, you don't, because it's all going out, even if you have enough income to support a loan, which most seniors don't.
Yes.
It's just all going to pay for your care.
So basically, what you're saying, I think, is if you start getting organized about your finances relatively early in your life, and you develop annuities and stock portfolios and other financial things outside your job, money, and your house, that you're in a much better position to deal with some of these things. I mean, I know that some insurance annuities can be helpful in this sort of thing, but I keep hearing from people, I want to keep my house.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. But basically, if you've run down all your money and the house is all you have left, then that is going to get taken probably no matter what you do.
You have options. You definitely have options. If there's a spouse living in your house, so if your spouse is well and living at home, Medicaid does not lien that house. So what a lien is, it's kind of, you can think of it as
Yes.
a mortgage.
Mortgage, yes.
They put it right on the house. If you're a single person and you write on the application, well, I want to go back home, they're not going to make you sell your house. It doesn't have to be realistic, and a lot of the times it's not. They're not going to make you sell your house. But what they're going to do is they're going to attach a lien to it, so that when they pay for your care, this kind of accumulates against the house. When in your lifetime, then they'll get paid back at that point.
Okay, so Medicaid expects to be paid back.
They expect to be paid back if
That
there's
is
any
a
way they
bummer,
can get it.
you know?
If there's any way they can get it, they will lien your probate estate through the court system when you
Yes.
die. They will lien your house if you've got one. If you have rental property, whatever you have, if it's not something they're going to force you to sell and spend down,
Yes.
and there are a couple of things that they won't. But if you have a spouse who's well and living in the home, as long as he or she is living there, they won't lien that property. So that's a
That's a benefit.
That's a benefit.
Yes.
They don't want to put your spouse out on the street. There was a law passed a couple decades back now called the Spousal Impoverishment Act, which is intended to protect the community spouse, the spouse who's living at home and who's doing well. But if you're not in the situation where you have a spouse at home, the other issue that comes up is, well, you've got an empty house. What are you going to do with it? Who's going to pay the insurance? Who's going to pay the taxes and the utilities? When you're in a nursing home and you're getting Medicaid, your income, whatever income you do have, goes to pay the nursing home.
Yes.
It's not going to be, for most people, it's not going to be enough. If it's enough for you, it's not, to pay the nursing home out of pocket, you probably aren't too worried. But for most people, they might be getting $1,000. That's what they're getting.
Yes.
And that ends up going to pay the nursing home. There's nothing that can, be there to maintain the residence.
Yes.
So people have to think of, either your family has to think about how they're going to maintain it, or if they sell it, then there's the Medicaid lien against it, and then that has to be paid off. And then you've got this lump of money, and the lump of money, of course, has to be spent on your care.
All of it?
Until you have $2,000 left.
Oh my gosh.
So if you're a single person and you're looking for Medicaid benefits, in cash, you have to have less than $2,000.
So to cut to the chase, which you have, it's complex,
It's complicated.
it's difficult,
Yes.
it's heartbreaking.
It can be. It can be, but it's not hopeless.
And I can see now that you've gone through this, the need for a lawyer. That, I mean, some of these can be avoided or can be planned for if you know what the track of that person's life is. You can foresee some of these things and try to help people either get around them or deal with them in the least painful manner.
And of course, the thing is, nobody's got a crystal ball. So
Yeah,
we
it would
can
be
never.
nice to have a crystal ball,
if we
wouldn't it?
did, my job would be so easy. I would just, get the winning lottery number and not worry about it.
Yes.
But no, we don't have a crystal ball. We can have some ideas, we can have some guesses. But when you're coming in and you're relatively healthy, or you're very healthy, and you've got a lot of good years in the community, there's a lot of planning that you can do. So we talked about protecting the house. One thing you can do, as I said, is just sell it for $1. Another thing that you can do is, and people will ask me about this, well, what if I give my child a remainder interest and I keep a life estate? You might have heard that word thrown around. A life estate just means the right to live in your house for the rest of your life.
Yes.
That's tricky too, and it's tricky for a couple of reasons. You've lost control over the property.
Yes, you have, because someone else actually owns it.
Someone else owns it. They can't kick you out, but
Yeah.
you can't kick them out either. If you need to do something with that house, if you want to sell it, you can't sell it without, whoever, your child, signing on the dotted line along with you. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they don't realize the gift is forever. I've had that happen.
It can't go back.
No. You give me $20 and I walk away. You can't come back to me next year and say, hey, Lucy, come up with it.
Yeah.
And I've had, unfortunately, where the family situation broke down, and the parent came back to me and said, I did this. I gave this life estate deed, and I gave the remainder interest to my child. But now they've done something, and I'm worried about them, and I don't want them to have it. I want to take it back. You can't. It's done.
You bring up something that a lawyer many, many years ago told me, and that is that you cannot legislate how people will feel about money when it becomes available.
Yeah.
That no matter how loving and wonderful a family, sometimes when money comes onto the table, it's a whole different ball game. And just another reason to have oh my gosh, we're out of time. Another reason to have a good lawyer.
Sure.
To help you sort that out.
Sure.
I can't believe we're out of time, but we are out of time. This
can't
just
believe it
flew.
either.
And there's so much we didn't get to talk to, but I'm so glad you were here.
No,
It was
thank you for
wonderful. I
inviting me.
learned a lot. It was
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us this evening also on The Total Woman.